Welcome back to the Training Bible Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Schell, and we are back for a training check-in with Dr. Phil. How's it going, Phil?
Good, Dave. It's I got a lot of fun stuff to talk about because I'm actually feeling pretty encouraged about the training plan that we devised. So,
yeah, and so if people, you can always go back and listen. I think I called it like a peek behind the curtain inside the mind of a coach or something. So we're kind of doing a project where I'm not even really coaching you. We just kind of like is more of a consult, and we talked about what you were doing, and I talked about what I might do differently. And so now it's been, I think, like 5 weeks, right?
Yeah, four or five weeks of consistent training. So that's the big buzzword that I probably will just be preaching until the day I die is consistency in training. But yeah, it's been 4 or 5 weeks, and we've gotten some pretty good progress, I would say. Yeah,
and I think I was excited to kind of get this on tape too, because we were talking, I don't know if we were talking over FaceTime or if it was over a text or something, but you were kind of excited about like what you've seen so far. And yeah, I think that's a kind of two things here is like, one, it's like, it's not super complicated.
No.
And, you know, like you said, the magic word is consistency. And that's like, I work with lots of people, and that's always the thing is like, what in your situation, what is the barrier to consistency? And then how do we like solve that? Because just by getting you to train more consistently, there's going to be progress. But the other part of it was like, you're essentially doing the same thing every week. And a lot of people, it would make them crazy. But for you, it's like, and I'm a proponent of it because it's like, it's exciting because you get to see that progress from week after week. And so, yeah, tell us about what it's been like over the last few weeks.
Yeah. So for those of you who, didn't tune into the first one or just want a quick synopsis, Dave and I, walked through like my goals, like kind of like the outcome goals that I want and like other things like that. And we came to this conclusion that, training, probably 5 times a week was within my time constraints. And doing something where we're switching from running to cycling every other day, was going to be kind of, beneficial, because I had found in the past that if I string together too many days of running, I can wind up with overuse injuries and other things like that. But by switching from running to cycling, running, it gives me a good opportunity to recover in between those two. And then, maybe add a little bit more, say like, time on the feet, as it were, aerobic volume, without accumulating too much, running specific stress. So Mondays I've been doing a kind of like VO2 max style, running workout where I run up and down this hill that's like right outside my house. It started as 6 minutes up the hill, but now I'm at 5 minutes up the hill, which is pretty cool. So that's like kind of like a VO2 max style workout. And then Tuesdays we come back and actually do another VO2 max style workout, but this time on the bike, and it's 3 minutes on, 3 minutes off. Pretty standard VO2 max, style workout. And the reasoning behind putting 2 VO2 max workouts back to back was we wanted to kind of front load, like the beginning of the week with, kind of like fatigue. Like we wanted to make it so if I could handle it, 2 VO2 max workouts, get a really big stimulus, recover, on Wednesday with, like either, like hiking or, really, really easy running. Haven't transitioned to easy running yet, just really easy hiking. And then an easy sort of recovery zone 2 bike day. And then, the end of the week, do something that's a little bit longer in terms of, sustained effort. So I'm doing more of like a tempo workout, and that tempo workout is 3 minutes on, 1 minute off, 5 times, 5-minute rest, and then 3 minutes on, 1 minute off, 3 times. And that's the tempo workout.
And let's just like, for clarification, when you say tempo in running,
yeah, it's closer to probably second threshold than if we were saying tempo for cycling. Because tempo for cycling is just above zone 2. Tempo for running would be a little bit closer to second threshold. And we're doing a lot of this based off of the cycling. I have targets for power. just based off of, like what my previous assessments and stuff have said. But running outside is pretty much all RPE based. So Mondays, the RPE is pretty much 6 to 10.
Yeah.
Or, it's actually
it's a
probably
pretty wide range.
It is. It's probably an 8 to 10 for the intervals.
Yep.
And then Fridays, it's a 6 to 8. So it's a little bit easier, but because the rest is a lot shorter, you have to do that in order to sustain the proper pace and the proper RPE. So
let's talk about two things real quick. Is one, how do you feel? Like the RPE is kind of new to you, right? Like as far as training by RPE, and so like, what's that been like? Has it kind of been a revelation?
Yeah, I really like it. It gives me the ability to be more in tune with my body and adjust speed, power, those sort of things accordingly. And that is something that I hadn't been willing to give myself kind of like the grace to do in the past. So that's been really nice. I'm still taking, I'm still recording, heart rate, speed of intervals, SMO2 with my Moxie monitors. And then on the bike days, I am leaning a little bit more towards like power output, but I have a wide enough range that I can go by RPE as well. So I say, okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So that's the other piece I wanted to touch on is like the first week you did it, you kind of struggled with it the first time you went to do intervals because it was locked in and I can't, I don't know if you're doing it on Zwift or what, but it's like, this is your effort. And you're like, and it was hard for you to like go below it, but it's like over time. And like, I think that kind of leads into the next thing is like, what did you do the first week? I can't remember. Did you do 2 or 3 intervals and you had to decrease your target quite a bit, right?
Yeah. So I think like initially we were like, oh, we're going to do something along the lines of like 4 intervals on Tuesday. And then, Fridays are going to be, like 5 and 5 or something like that. And I was like, no way, especially after the first thing. It was like, I was coming off of a hard, like VO2 max style workout on Monday for running. And then my legs felt like absolute garbage on the bike. And I don't use Zwift. I actually have like a fan bike, but it has power output on it. So I can still program. I can program ranges and then it shows up on my watch. But the problem is that I didn't program the lower end low enough. So when I was only hitting 270 or 280 for these 3 minutes on, that was below that threshold. So it just kept beeping at me and saying, hey, you're not going fast enough. And I was like, Garmin, you don't know me. And I was getting so mad that I was like, okay, we're going to widen that range. Just give myself, some target that's actually attainable. And so I lowered it like from 300 to 350 to 275 to 380 or something like that. Just made it a wider range to hit. And the reason why I did that and I was okay with doing that is because I said, well, we just did a really hard workout on Monday. That's a very good VO2 max stimulus. If I come back the next day and it's not up to my VO2 max standards for biking in a fresh state, that's fine. It's still getting us like 90% of the way there, even if I hit 275, for example.
And so I'm curious, did you see anything? We just recorded another podcast talking about NIRS and SMO2. So did you see so your RPE was higher coming off that run workout that you did the previous day. So RPE is higher. You're feeling like crap. You had to lower the wattage targets a little bit. What about the SMO2 response? Was it still what you would expect for like a fresh VO2 workout?
I would have to go back and look. Most likely no, and most likely what happened was I wasn't able to get SMO2 as low as I normally would.
Okay.
Because that's normally how it presents itself, at least for me. During a warm-up, what I do is I measure to see what the low and the highs of say, SMO2 are, and then that kind of gives me an idea of, training readiness and like those sort of things. However, those numbers seemed fine. So from, from an overall, say, stress perspective, it seemed okay. But then when I actually went to go do the high intensity stuff, which is I think where a lot of this stuff presents itself.
Yeah.
It was like, it was awful. And I can almost guarantee you that SMO2 at say, 280 was as low as I could get it that day. Even though it was still a lot higher than in a fresh state, what I would normally be able to get down to.
Yeah. And so I think what the motivation was to record this or why we kind of got it on the schedule was you had texted me and just said, like, it's crazy. So again, doing the same workouts week in and week out, how quickly you were progressing from that first week. And so, describe that a little bit and kind of what you experienced from week to week.
Absolutely. Let's, I want to see if I can pop open my first trail workout. So like I said, the VO2 max workouts that I do on Mondays are up a big old hill. And I made a point of measuring. I do the same start point and the same end point every single time. And the first week, my all out numbers, and like, again, this is all RPE based. So it's just like, okay, go as hard as you possibly can, were 558 and 553. Now, let's see, that was 1, 2, 4, 5. 5 weeks later, if I can get it to work, 5 weeks later, same distance, I now hit 452 and 502 for the same distance. So that's a minute better.
That's impressive. And so, and talk about the bike too, real quick, and then I have a question for you. So how'd you progress on the bike over those 5 weeks?
Oh, like, so we said, like the first one, right? We were, it's awful. Let me see if I can, oh, dang it. I don't know if it's going to give me the averages. Oh yeah, it is. Okay. So for like those initial averages, I couldn't even get above 300 watts after the first workout. The first interval today was 312. The second interval was 328, and the third interval was 345 for 3 minutes. And that's also pretty crazy to me, because my best, say, 5-minute average up until this point, the fresh is 378.
Yeah.
So this is where I was like just so pumped, and it all comes down to consistency and the correct amount of intensity. Like being interjected, into training. And
it doesn't take a lot, right? And that's like, I think everybody wants to, whenever people want to improve, they always want to take the intensity hammer to it.
Right. Right.
And it's like, it doesn't, like, one of my favorite analogies is that, like, intensity, like, so if training's like a soup, intensity is the salt. And it doesn't take a lot. Like, you're just trying to bring out the flavor, right? And so as an exercise physiologist, how would you explain that rapid progression? And like, I have some thoughts too, but I'd be curious, like, as an expert.
Yeah, there's a few things going on. And one of the things that really stands out to me just before we actually get into the physiological explanation of changes is most of the time, we, like myself included, as researchers, we are doing research to find the optimal or the maximal adaptations for people throughout, like a given time course of a study, say 5 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever it is. So most of the time, what we're doing is we're saying we're going to do a VO2 max workout every other day for the 5 or 8 weeks. One of the challenges with that is that, yes, we're going to find what's going to give us the most improvement in VO2 max, but we're not taking into account how continuous, how consistent these individuals could stay with that training over time. So that was a big thing that Dave and I talked about when I was first coming out, I was like, look, like I only have an hour to an hour and a half to train. I'm only doing this amount of VO2 max work, this amount of this work, so on and so forth. And Dave looked at my training peaks and, like was like, okay, well, we can aim for this and maybe we can try this. And again, we were aiming, on that first Tuesday for the VO2 max bike work, maybe for a little bit more and at higher intensities, but immediately we knocked it down. And that was good because I'm still gaining adaptations from it. And so go ahead.
Yeah, I think, and this is something like I was thinking today about, like, this is another podcast I want to do, but like we can just insert it here. It's like, I think that's a trap that people fall into now because it's with these structured workouts and stuff that as if they're written in stone. Like I need to do 6 intervals today and it has to be at this wattage. And if I don't complete them or I don't do it at that wattage, it was a failure. Mm-hmm. But the way that I look at it is if everything's green all the time, then you're not improving. Like you shouldn't be able to complete your workouts 100% all the time because we're trying to find the limit on that day and not go over the limit all the time either. And so it's like being flexible and like you said, it's like, okay, we were going to try for 4. You got through 2 or 3 and it's like, okay, that's what I have today. Mm-hmm. And we'll come back next week and try it again and see, and it's like, so and I think you said it perfectly, like giving yourself the grace to be flexible and listen to your body and like not hang your ego or your self-worth on the amount of intervals you did or what the wattage was that day,
Right. Right. And I yesterday was one of those days. I, kind of felt like dog shit. It was super windy and cold. There was like all these things. And I mean, I still wound up eking out, like a similar times to what I had done the previous week. But from an RPE perspective, like last week is still hard. It was probably like a 9.5 out of 10. But the second interval going up that hill, the second interval going up that hill was probably like 10. And I almost threw up at the end. And, so it was like I had to push myself that much harder in order for the ego to be happy in that case to get an even slower time than last week on the second one. So, so it was one of those things where, it was like probably could have just said, okay, I'm just going to back off a little bit and that's okay. And I think that's what I'm kind of excited for is like I feel like my body is getting to a point where it's like, yep, let's take a little bit of like a deload like we were talking about, and then let's come back and let's do more intervals, similar sort of workouts, but then that's going to require me to kind of recalibrate and start over. I'm not going to go into next week's workouts or 2 weeks workouts expecting, oh, I'm going to get up this hill in sub 5 3 times in a row. It's like, no. We might have to start at 5:45 or 6 flat in order for us to get there. But back to the physiological explanation for things. I think there's a few things that go on. So anytime I see kind of rapid improvement in things, I say, okay, well, what aspects of the human body can improve rather rapidly? Number one, blood volume expansion is a huge one. And typically we see this with things like heat training. And this is why people are recommended, if you have a hot race or something like that, do heat training 2 to 3 weeks beforehand because your plasma volume can expand. That will, allow you to have more blood to push to your skin while also maintaining blood oxygen to the muscles. So, there's always a chance that is expanding a little bit more. There's always the psychological aspect of things, I think, is also plays a huge role. Just getting comfortable with the pain of doing something over and over and over again. Yeah. Because when I first did it, I can guarantee you that I was not hitting the same physiological pain during the 6 minute versus during the 5 minute that I just did. But at the time, it still felt, like what I thought was a 9 or a 10, on the RPE scale. Yeah. So there's that. So it's just practice, right? You just get better at handling the pain by doing stuff that feels like shit, No, I call it
theory of relativity kind of thing where, or like shifting baselines, right? And it's like, if you haven't done hard efforts in a while, then your basis for what's hard or your reference for what's hard comes down a bit. And so the first time you do it, it's a shock to your system and it like, and I see this a lot with warm-ups, especially, or something like, let's say that you're going to do some intervals or something, and in your warm-up, you include like a 1 minute really hard effort or something. Well, now when you go on and do those 6 minute intervals at an RPE of 7, it's going to feel much more tolerable than that 1 minute at RPE 9 or 10 that you just did, you know?
Right.
So yeah, I agree with you. And that's one of the things I was thinking to attribute to. And what's the other things you think?
Yeah, I think, the mitochondrial function can change very, very fast as well.
Oh, really?
Yes. So mitochondrial volume changes slowly.
Right.
Mitochondrial function changes really fast. So during my PhD, I did a human clinical exercise study where we took people through 7 high intensity interval training sessions where it was 1 minute on at 90% max heart rate, 1 minute off, and we just did that 10 times. So it was just 10 by 1 minute, and we showed that mitochondrial function improved 20 to 30% across the entire population. Granted, there were, some responders, some non-responders, those sort of things. But that was without any changes to like measurable protein, which is structure.
Yeah.
Structure takes time. So I'm probably getting, so initially probably mitochondrial benefits because I was doing such high intensity stuff. And now I'm slowly getting the buildup of that structure, so I was laying the signal for improvements in my foundation, and now I'm building up the foundation. So I think that plays a huge role in it.
Yeah.
And then also, go ahead.
Yeah. And I think that, and maybe this is what you're going to say next. But I think like you and I talked about it, and I talked about how excited I was to like do essentially the same workouts week in and week out. And that a lot of times like it's hard because there isn't a entertainment aspect to it. Like people enjoy working out because it's their escape. Right. And so that like it can be hard for people to do the same workouts over and over again. But in talking about progressive overload, I think we fall into this trap too, where it's like a lot of times people want it to be like, okay, well, I did 5 hours this week. Next week is 5.5 hours. The next week is 6 hours. The next week is 6.5 hours. And it's like, you were just speaking to it. Like your body doesn't adapt that quickly. Like there are aspects that adapt that quickly, but I think especially with running, there's a lot of value in repeating a week. If you've been training for 3 hours a week or whatever, like 20 miles a week, then like bump it up to 25 miles or 30 miles, but then hold it until you habituate or adapt to that week before you bump it up again. Otherwise you're just always chasing it and you never realize that like one, like it's a good feeling to like have success at workouts and to see that progress. And then two, just like you feel things getting easier and you see the progress organically. And then when it's easy and you're completing everything 100%, okay, now it's time to bump it up again.
Yeah, no. And that's the next step, right? Is like, I had asked you, I was like, and I had been thinking about this a lot, like during my workouts and stuff. I was like, well, at what point, do we actually start to progress? Right.
Yeah.
Cause like technically I have actually been progressing because I've been going faster and having higher power outputs during my intervals. And that's without changing any of like, like the work rest schemes or anything like that. So it's like, okay, well, I think, maximize the adaptation you can get within a given workout. And what I did, because I was telling you about this, what I did is I mapped my times for the 2 VO2 max hill intervals. And what I was looking for is I was looking for like what happened is it was like a linear trend downwards. And now what I've found is that actually I've kind of reached that elbow point.
Well, and that occurs everywhere, right? Like the point of diminishing returns. It's like we see it like a new athlete who just starts training. it's a really sharp trajectory, and then it kind of plateaus out, and it gets harder to get the same improvement off the same amount of work. And so then you need a new stimulus. And so you're seeing it kind of in the reverse, where it's like you're seeing the improvement, and now it's starting to, and so now it's like, okay, like, how do you apply a new stimulus so that you keep seeing the progress there?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, so that's where we're at now, right? Is like, and, in all honesty, is like, legs feeling a little bit tired. So, and mentally too, just feeling like, okay, I think, like maybe taking the gas or the foot off the gas pedal for like a week, kind of, reestablish, and then start to slowly add, like again, like maybe we haven't discussed this like 100% yet, but, perhaps adding, an interval onto like the Monday workouts, but because the Tuesday workouts were still progressing in terms of, like those sort of things, maybe keeping that. And then after I kind of establish the Monday workouts a little bit, maybe then I add an extra interval, to, or some extra time to the Tuesday workouts.
Yeah. And like a lot of times the way I think about training or progressive overload or whatever is like novel stress. And I don't want to introduce too many novel stresses at the same time, because we want to know like what's having the impact. And so like you're saying, and right now the primary thing is the running, because you have that race. And so it's like, yeah, I think add another interval, and then maybe you like take the biking, either like maybe you start over at 2 again, because there's going to be more stress from that first workout.
Right.
And so rather than thinking like, oh, I'm just going to go in and like knock out what I just did last week. Like, but we also talked about you doing some kind of like baseline testing after unloading this week too. So I think that would be good, and will help to kind of inform where we spend our training budget.
Yeah. I think that'll give us more of an idea. The challenge is, there's benefits and there's challenges to this. I don't have a treadmill that I can do, actually, there's one more physiological thing I wanted to talk about. It's just efficiency of movement.
Well, I was going to say neuromuscular too.
I was not able, say, to access the same amount of effort during my runs at the beginning of this block compared to where I'm at now.
Yeah.
And that's always been something that's been challenging lately, just because I haven't, done a lot of really high intensity running, hiking sort of work, is I just never felt like I was able to actually access my full fitness potential. I've been able to do it on the bike for forever. But now I'm feeling like, oh, if I need to do a VO2 max workout during running, I can really actually manage that effort.
Yeah.
So there's that as well. And then I think too, just like, I have some Achilles issues, like fairly regularly. And I've just been doing like heavy, slow, eccentric Achilles, like calf raises after every run. And I think that's also
lowers.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. You know what I was saying. But just in the time of strengthening that, it's just like felt better. Like my calves feel better. My Achilles feel better. I'm not like constantly worried, oh, is this going to be the day that my Achilles just, blow up on me?
Well, and I think just going back to how we were talking about, like, you were saying the mitochondrial function can change really quickly, but density takes time. Structural changes take time, right? And so I think about that a lot, like especially with running. And I think people can get themselves into trouble because it's like all these other things are changing more quickly than your tendon strength and, things like that. And so it's one of the things we talked about early on is like, I think maybe we're taking more time off, like later in the week or something. And what we talked about with that easy kind of hike or whatever was like not allowing things to heal in a shortened state and stuff like that.
Right.
And so I think that's a big piece of this too, is just like, I always think about, what is it? We are what we repeatedly do,
Yep.
And so trying to condition the tendons and ligaments and everything to be able to handle that load. And that takes time. But if you're not doing it frequently enough or whatever, then it like, you're kind of like doing the change and then undoing it and then doing it and undoing it. And so I think, yeah, again, it comes back to that consistency and just being able to not miss training, not get injured, and makes you more robust and durable so that you can handle more going forward.
Yeah, it's it's something I've thought about, quite a bit, because I've been making an effort to watch, more, of these like health and wellness influencers and what people tell you to do and other things like that. And I'm like, man, don't listen. Being a health and fitness influencer, don't listen to all that fancy, BS. Oh, this workout's going to make your, marathon, 7 minutes faster, blah, blah, blah. The best things you can do. And again, this is just because they're easy does not make them, or just because they're simple does not make them easy, is stay consistent. Because that consistency is going to allow you, like you said, build durability, build efficiency, small incremental changes over time here, which if you're, it's like, for example, if you, I had actually somebody asked this question the other day. They said, would you rather have somebody train 6 days a week at, like 6 miles per day, or take that 30 miles that they did, or I guess it'd be 36 miles, and do it in, 2 runs? And I was like, frequency. Whenever we look at any literature, whenever we look at, people who are the most successful, it's the frequency that they're touching on things. Granted, I wouldn't have them do the same pace for every single 6-mile workout, but I would say, if you're somebody who's just getting into this sort of stuff, like, your body has so much room for adaptation that building up that frequency over time is going to touch on that adaptation more and more and more and more, as opposed to, oh, well, I run 12 miles, 2 times a week, once on Monday, once on Friday. It's like, well, you just created a huge stress. You might have adapted to it by the first or second day, and then you start decreasing the adaptation, and so you're not hitting that frequency of stimulation enough. So just for me, just having the 5 days a week, and then something else I actually added too was I'm doing a 30-minute walk in the morning and a 30-minute walk at night, and initially, no, I don't think it actually led to me being more tired or anything like that. But the whole point of it is to, again, get more time on my feet, because I do walk with more minimalistic shoes, like on the treadmill and other things like that. So I'm stressing my feet in a way that's different than when I'm running outside, than when I'm on the bike, than when I'm on, running trails versus roads. And like I said, I don't think, because all my other numbers were pointing positively, I don't think it induced more stress and more fatigue. But I do think, it helps in a lot of other ways, in terms of adaptation.
I think it does too. I mean, I live in Boulder, and there's a couple of years where the Japanese marathon Olympic team would just be like, you'd go out to Boulder Reservoir and they'd just be walking around in their jumpsuits all the time, like just walking miles and miles and miles. Right. And it's like, I think that's huge. And again, that's where the time on the feet thing comes from, because it's like, it's pretty low stress, but it's great for your tendons and ligaments.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, it helps with efficiency and things like that. But it's, when you said you weren't sure if it added fatigue, I feel like it's crazy to me. Like, there's times when I've walked a lot and it just creeps up on me so slowly. Yeah. Like, all of a sudden I'm just so tired, and I'm like, all I've been doing is walking, but it takes like a few weeks for me to actually feel it. Yeah. Yeah. Like, and then I'm just like wrecked, just like so tired for like a few weeks.
I will say this though, like, depending on, like how I'm feeling or like what workout I did. For example, last night, normally I walk at around 2.5 miles an hour, because that's just a comfortable pace for me. Last night it was like 2.2. I was like, my legs aren't going any faster. I did a bike fit where we were riding a little bit, probably accumulated, 30, 40 minutes of, zone 2-ish riding. Did my VO2 max workout earlier in the day, had walked that morning, those sort of things. And it was the time where I was like, okay, I need to pump the brakes and just slow down a little bit. And I also find too that like fatigue for me manifests itself as an inability to concentrate as well. So when I am getting like really tired, it's more, I'm disconnected from what I'm supposed to be doing, and I'm just trying to find that fast dopamine, like watching YouTube videos and watching reels and other things like that. So those are both, kind of indications to me, maybe, like especially yesterday, just because it was like a long day, it's like maybe that fatigue is, sort of like starting to add up. But it was something that I had noticed that I was like, when I was in Kona, we were walking 20,000 plus steps a day because, and we didn't get a rental car or anything like that. We were just walking everywhere, talking to people, doing those sort of things. And I had noticed that like I was sleeping better, and maybe it's just because I just wasn't stressed about other stuff in my life. But I think that, like walking can just be beneficial because you can, sort of, breathe a little bit. If you can go outside and do it and it's not too cold, then it's like, okay, you're getting out into nature. Helps with digestion actually, because of like the movement of the body actually kind of stimulates a little bit more digestion. You can potentially control a little bit more of like your glucose levels and insulin levels and those sort of things by just increasing your contraction mediated glucose uptake in your muscle. So it's just something that I was like, I should probably move more. That was the bottom line of things. And I had previously found good success when I did an ultra marathon back in, when was it? It was like March of 2023. So way like over a year and a half now. And most of my training was, I still trained, but I tried to accumulate a lot of walking. And, that was like stayed healthy the entire time, actually got through the race, those sort of things, and got through the race on like suboptimal training as well. It was a 31 mile race. And I think the longest run that I had done was like 15 or 16 miles. So, I attribute kind of a lot of that to, just like walking, like those 20,000 steps a day plus. But yeah, that was a long tangent on just walking, because that was something that I did add, but it is something to be aware of, that if you do start adding, more walking and more other things like that, that is going to take away potentially from your ability to actually adapt to, say, the training that you're also trying to do. So you need to manage the stress accordingly. Yeah.
And I think that's a big takeaway there is like, we've talked about this before. It's really doing about like training is all about doing the most amount of training that you can recover from and adapt to. Mm-hmm. Right. And so that's different for everybody. It's different for everybody, where some people, they have really stressful jobs if they're not sleeping well. So it's like a lot of times people it's not just always about more. Mm-hmm. It's about how much can you do and still recover from and adapt to.
Right. 100%. I think that's a good stopping point. Great words of wisdom there, Dave.
Exactly. So, you can find Phil at Critical Oxygen or at Critical O2 on Instagram. You can also find his podcast, Critical Oxygen. And you can find me at Kaizen Endurance on Instagram or at kaizenendurance.coach on the interwebs. We'll check in with Phil in another few weeks and see how it's progressing.
Perfect. Thanks again, Dave, for all your help, and thanks for listening, everybody. This is a fun little journey that I wanted to do for a while, and now that we have, Dave and I have this project, I'm excited to see, what the potential outcomes are.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you've got questions, either shoot me a DM at Kaizen Endurance on Instagram, or you can send me a text through the show notes on wherever you're finding your podcast. Until next time, thanks for listening.